Hello, and welcome to Introduction to Strategic Planning, Increasing Your Impact. I'm Frank Martinelli, and I'll be your guide. If you're like me, you've probably heard some groups talk about their strategic planning experiences, and it's not always a rosy picture. What's happening here? I'd like to use a recent Dilbert cartoon to illustrate the experience of strategic planning for some groups. You may have seen the cartoon. It begins with a new employee coming into the office, and the first thing out of the boss's mouth is to the new person, "I'm going to put you on the strategic planning team." It's lots of meetings, and you don't have to work too hard. Another employee comes up to the new person and says, "Look, don't worry about it. I'll tell you about strategic planning." And he proceeds to do that. We have lots of meetings. We talk in vague emotional terms about mission and strategy. We start to get excited. We actually begin to think that we can have an impact and make a difference. And then we snap out of it and decide that we're basically going to keep on doing what we've always done. And then we develop a PowerPoint presentation to illustrate that decision. Well, the new employee hears the word PowerPoint, gets all excited and says, "Hey, I'm really good at PowerPoint. I'll make the slides." And the other employee goes, "Actually, we just used the PowerPoint presentation from last year." No wonder people aren't enthusiastic about strategic planning when this is what it's been like. Today's program has a very different view of strategic planning and is going to provide you, the learner, with practical tools, techniques, and real-life examples of successful strategic planning in nonprofit organizations like yours. This program will enable you to make strategic planning a productive experience in your organization. In this program, I'll be covering the following topics: the relationship between planning and organizational effectiveness, basic steps and major challenges in the planning process, practical techniques to create a strategic plan, and advice on how to prepare to do the planning. The Dilbert cartoon notwithstanding, more and more nonprofits are doing strategic planning because they understand that it is a must in today's fast-changing environment. And here's the good news. In the nonprofit world, there are many examples of successful strategic planning. We're going to hear about some of them right now.
Strategic planning has benefited La Casa de Esperanza in many ways. One of the most significant ways has been through a clear identification of our priorities. La Casa de Esperanza is the only Latino organization in Waukesha County. Therefore, there is a great expectation to do everything for everyone. Therefore, our strategic planning process has been key, identifying our priorities, identifying the areas of service for La Casa, and really limited our staff and the organization to concentrate in a few areas and do these areas well instead of trying to do more than what we should have maybe do.
For the American Lung Association, arriving at a shared vision and mission and articulating that very clearly has had a number of important benefits. One is that it helped us to identify some important, what I would call dashboard indicators that we monitor regularly that helps and that process helps to keep us focused. Secondly, it's created the framework for both our annual planning and our individual goal setting. So every member of the staff has a very clear line of vision between what that person is doing today and the ultimate vision and mission of the association. And I think that clear line of vision has been really important. Thirdly, I think we've saved a lot of time. There's clear communication, there's shared understanding. Going through the process enabled us to learn from each other, and we don't have to repeat that at every meeting or at every planning session. So on a very pragmatic level, it's helped us be more efficient.
Strategic planning has benefited Martin Luther King Economic Development Corp most by providing a tool or a vehicle for what I consider as real board participation in decision making for the future, and really getting the board involved in deciding on our agenda and activities and how we would serve the community in the future. Having a shared mission and vision in our organization has really helped out in fundraising, It's helped us to define our organization, to be more focused. Our board is now able to really define and tell the community what our aims are, what our mission is. So it allows us to focus our, as I mentioned earlier, focus our fundraising and to really be on the same page. It's also been important in terms of choosing programs and projects for the future. And as much as that we have this vision that those projects and activities can be consistent with or support, then there's less discussion around the table about whether or not we should go in this direction or that direction. It's really helped us to be able to focus in both and also define our agency.
There are all sorts of opportunities and also a variety of challenges facing nonprofits today. But I think board directors having a plan which they understand and which is relevant now and in the near future gives those directors a sense of confidence that yes, we do know where we're going, and yes, whether I'm out there either asking for resources or trying to recruit someone to join the board, I can tell them clearly what we're up to, and the plan does help that way.
What strategic planning really did for us was to give us an opportunity as a group of people to talk about what we do from a completely different standpoint. Not from the day-to-day, what we're doing right now, what the current crisis is, what the current question is, but who are we, what do we do, why do we exist, and what should we do about that? And that was a very freeing conversation for people. It made it so that we looked at ourselves in ways we don't usually take the time to do. The major benefit was making sure that we actually were all on the same page, that we looked at ourselves, that we said, where we are going is an exciting place to go. It's the development of the vision and the mission and having everybody be together, really understanding what we're doing and having it be just an exciting time to think about that. And that means that everybody then within the organization is now going back to that vision and that mission and saying, aha, this is why we do what we do, or how about in order to do something, why don't we do it this way because that would be consistent.
Well, I really think that strategic planning has made all the difference for Agape Community Center. We were really in a state of being reactive, really responding to opportunities that came our way, both funding and otherwise, and strategic planning has really changed that completely to where now we're very proactive, looking for opportunities and aggressively pursuing them.
So having a plan in place that you can go back and review to see if you're on the right track, if you've accomplished your goals, if you need to review your mission again to see if it really fits with where the community is taking you and the needs of the community, that gives you the opportunity to have a document to review and say, this is what we said we're going to do, this is how we're doing, and this is what we need to do.
Finally, having a shared mission and vision, we're all on the same page. Before we did strategic planning, there was a lot of people with a lot of different ideas and priorities. Now there's really no controversy about what we're trying to do or what we're trying to accomplish. We're all moving in the same direction.
As we just heard, nonprofits are realizing a number of important benefits, including determining a clear sense of direction and focus, improvements in service delivery, enhanced marketing and fundraising efforts, and increased board effectiveness. According to Brian Barry, author of Strategic Planning Workbook for Nonprofits, strategic planning usually involves fundamental choices about the mission, vision, and goals your organization will pursue, whom you will serve, your organization's role in the community, the kinds of programming, services, or products you will offer, the resources needed to succeed, people, money, expertise, relationships, facilities, and so forth, and how you can best combine these resources, programming, and relationships to accomplish your organization's mission. Successful strategic planning efforts share a number of qualities or characteristics. Let's talk about these elements of effective strategic planning practice. The first is a shared understanding of strategic planning on the part of the board and staff. Second, real commitment to the process. This means that people are ready to commit the necessary time and effort to planning. Third, clear, agreed-upon outcomes for the planning process. What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to end up with? It may be as general as a strategic plan to guide us over the next 3 years. Or more specific, you want a new vision statement and a plan for developing a diverse revenue base to replace previous reliance on 2 large federal grants that will no longer be available in the future. The fourth quality is leadership of the board. It is the board's responsibility to assure that there is a current strategic plan in place. If your nonprofit board is serious about strategic planning, and it needs to be, it will establish a strategic planning committee. Fifth, there needs to be involvement of many. While the board has a special responsibility, in order to be effective, strategic planning must involve individuals representing all constituencies of your nonprofit: the board, staff, funders and donors, as well as other key community supporters and stakeholders. Finally, an effective strategic plan is structured in ways that encourage boldness, risk-taking, and creativity. Let me also say that throughout the program, I'll be talking about the importance of, quote, strategic planning, unquote. The larger message is the importance of strategic thinking on an ongoing basis. Strategic planning is the formal structured process that provides you with the opportunity to think strategically, and this needs to carry over into the ongoing life of the organization. To better illustrate the concept of the importance of clear outcomes and board and staff involvement, I'd like to introduce you now to our first featured organization. In the following video case study, Eileen Mershart, Executive Director of the YWCA of Madison, Wisconsin, talks about why they decided to engage in the process and how board and staff and community stakeholders were involved.
The YWCA of Madison's mission is basically the mission of the entire YWCA organization in this country, which is about eliminating racism and empowering women. What we do here in Madison to achieve that fairly lofty goal is through employment and training programs that we provide, housing, affordable housing, shelter for homeless families, a program for moms with small children, as well as racial justice programming. The YWCA of Madison has engaged in 3 planning processes over the last 7 or 8 years. The first 2 were fairly intense and very broad in our scope and conversation with the community. The third one, we were in essence, we were able to build on the work of those first 2 so that we didn't go into the depth or the length of time that was involved in the first 2. Although those weren't terribly lengthy processes, the third one was very focused. The long-term commitment to doing strategic planning has, I think, helped this YWCA stay focused. It's also helped us to stay in touch with what the community's needs are and to assess our programs in light of those needs so that we can make informed decisions about what programs we need to continue, what programs we might need to change, or what programs we need to stop doing. It also gives us an opportunity to think about ways in which we can collaborate more with other organizations, and we do a lot of that as it is, but are there other opportunities that we might see out there? It's important to involve the board and staff in a planning process for a variety of reasons. Number one, the board is the ultimate group of people that is accountable to the community and to our funders, if you will, and has the fiduciary responsibility as well as the ethical responsibility to ensure that the organization is fulfilling its mission. They need to be involved because they need to have their arms around what we do and how we do it. The staff needs to be involved because they know what's going on at the ground level. They deal with issues day to day. They see clearly what our issues are and how we fulfill that mission, and have a wealth of ideas about how we can better do that. You can't be everything to everyone. And a board and a staff need to have a real clear sense of what our mission is and what our vision is. And that shared vision and mission means that everybody's going in the same direction, we're all on the same page, and while we're doing different things, we're all pulling in the same direction.
Sometimes strategic planning is confused with long-range planning, business planning, and fund development planning. They are all related, and they are all distinct from strategic planning. Strategic planning sets the foundation for these other types of planning later. There are three things in particular that distinguish strategic planning. The first is the attention you pay to changes in the external environment, your markets and stakeholders. The second is the focus on developing a sense of shared vision for the future and the way this shared vision drives the rest of the planning process. And the third distinguishing feature is that strategic planning is, well, it's strategic. Gary Hamel, in his article, Strategy is Revolution, shares the observation that many strategic plans are not strategic at all. They are, in fact, more focused on putting out brush fires instead of addressing critical emerging issues. Business as usual instead of innovation. If you're going to do strategic planning, you need to make sure that it's strategic. This program will show you how. As I begin to describe the steps of strategic planning, it helps to think of the process as a journey. Imagine a sailboat at sea, at the mercy of ever-changing conditions, ocean currents, and winds. Now think of planning as a journey through sometimes rough waters to a destination you have determined. Strategic planning is how you determine the destination and how you intend to get there. The model I am about to present consists of 7 steps in a logical progression. At the same time, it's important to note that strategic planning should be a creative and dynamic process that includes innovation, intuition, and breaking the mold. Let's be clear on this point. We're talking about a process that is both intuitive and logical, right brain and left brain together, if you will. Let me also acknowledge that there are different definitions for some of the planning terms that I will be using during the program. I'm not here to say that there is only one right way to define these terms. Rather, you must make sure that there is agreement within your planning team on what these terms mean. Let's quickly walk through the 7 steps of the strategic planning process. Step 1, information gathering and analysis. Step 2, identification of critical issues facing your organization. Step 3, developing a mission statement, why we exist. Step 4, development of a strategic vision statement that sets future direction, the future that we aspire to create. Step 5, development of strategic goals. These are the major accomplishments on our journey to the vision or hoped-for destination. Step 6, formulation of strategies for each goal, how we will accomplish the goals, the methods and the approaches we will use. And finally, Step 7, preparation for operational planning based on the strategic plan, making the transition from the strategic blueprint to concrete plans of action. I refer to this level of planning as objectives. Now I'll go through each step and offer examples of each. Step number 1, information gathering and analysis. How do you go about gathering the information that is such a vital part of the strategic planning process? This information gathering and analysis step has 3 parts. Number 1, the external assessment, sometimes referred to as environmental scanning. Number 2, the internal assessment, that's looking at the internal workings of your organization, usually expressed as strengths and weaknesses. And 3, the market or constituent assessment. This information gathering is sometimes referred to as the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Let's talk more about external assessment. The first place you look is outside the organization, in the environment in which your organization operates. You want answers to the following questions. What external changes and trends will have the greatest impact on our nonprofit and the people we are attempting to serve? And how could we respond to these changes and trends? What's changing, and how should we respond? You might start with trends and changes unique to your field and area of service. For example, if you're working in the health field, a key trend to watch is the continuing dramatic increase in health insurance costs. If you're in education, the growing popularity of charter schools. At the same time, it's important to examine broader changes and trends in demographics, the economy, politics, social and cultural life, law, and philanthropy. Examples of broad trends include the aging of the population, increase in ethnic and racial diversity in America, the continuing impact of emerging technologies, to name a few. Here's an example of this thinking process. A trend might be continued greater proportional growth of minorities and persons with disabilities in the workforce. The ability to manage diversity in the workforce will continue to be important. The implication for your organization might be develop plans to maintain and increase diversity of board, staff, and volunteers. You can gather this kind of information by interviewing outside experts, surveying board and staff members, and by reviewing summaries of external trend data. For example, local United Way's, the national offices of many organizations and libraries can be tapped. Professional journals specializing in a particular field are another good source of this kind of data. And of course, the World Wide Web is a powerful tool for gathering all kinds of planning data. Next, internal assessment. The second place to look is inside your organization. You examine facilities, personnel, financial management, the actual financial condition of your organization, use of technology, fund development, public relations, systems for planning, and more. You want to identify internal strengths and weaknesses. You're taking a snapshot of your organization as it operates in the present. Remember, however, that today's strength may not matter in the future based on decisions that come out of the strategic planning process later on. The third area of information gathering, market assessment, addresses the following questions. Who are your organization's key markets and constituents? And for nonprofit organizations, they typically include clients or customers, funders, volunteers, community leaders, partners, and collaborators. What are the needs, perceptions, and service expectations of each of these markets? How do they view us? And what do they look to us for? Next, what are the emerging market needs and service expectations? What's changing? What's next? Next, how could your organization respond to these changes and trends in its markets? Organizations gather this kind of information through a variety of means, including market research surveys, focus groups, review of secondary market research, just to name a few. And again, the World Wide Web is an important source of this kind of market research. Here's a market assessment example. In one nonprofit, program volunteers had never been asked if they would be willing to do fundraising for the organization. During the strategic planning process, a key finding was that 2/3 of these volunteers surveyed said that they would be willing to help raise funds for the agency in some capacity. What's the implication of a finding like this? Develop a plan for involving these volunteers in agency fundraising activities in the future. To better illustrate the importance of understanding the external changes and trends that will have impact on nonprofits in the future, I'd like to introduce to you now our second featured organization. The International Crane Foundation, based in Baraboo, Wisconsin, works worldwide to conserve cranes and the wetland, grassland, and other ecosystems on which they depend. In the following video case study, Kelly Tucker, Vice President of Programs of the International Crane Foundation, talks about some of the external or societal trends and changes affecting the foundation and ways the strategic planning process helped them figure out how to respond.
Our mission is to protect cranes and the wetland, grassland, and other ecosystems on which they depend. Now that's pretty fixed and focused. You've got birds and you've got the places that they need. Everything from the organisms and the plants to the animals to the things that are larger than they are in that web. But the second part for us is then to pass on the knowledge, the technical skill, and the experience to engage people in caring for those cranes, in conserving those cranes as well. There are several levels of external trends and changes today that are affecting how the International Crane Foundation's doing its business. First, there are some generic things for nonprofit organizations that are true for conservation organizations as well. Sarbanes-Oxley, financial accountability is a much stronger issue for those who are funding nonprofit organizations to the federal governments that oversee them. And complying with those things that's a learning process, something that you learn stepwise and move forward with and encompass slowly. That's a challenge for nonprofit organizations, but not an insurmountable one. Then there are a level of trends that really come home to us here at the International Crane Foundation and are very particular to our brand of conservation. There are wars going on. There's famine in many of the countries we work in. It's often very difficult to walk into some of the places we walk into and say, cranes are very important to you. As we began our strategic planning process at the International Crane Foundation, we had two pools of information that we drew on extensively. First was 31 years of knowledge about what's going on in the various places where we work, watching the changes and the trends that have taken place, very much a field-oriented perspective, what we've endured, what we've been through. The second was from newer staff that had come on board in the last couple of years, not so much weighted down with or enamored with the tradition of ICF, but trying to come in and use a new set of tools because it's what they brought with them to elucidate what they saw happening, how they saw ICF responding. And that was a very interesting mix of perspectives. The strategic planning process, as we actually began it when we sat down to talk with board and staff all in one room with consultants, was just an amazing process of, well, we don't do that. Well, yes, we do. Well, how did we do that? Oh, you mean like that? It was just this amazing exchange of watching people almost get to the same spot, always a few outliers, never perfect, never always smooth, always little periods of challenge and contest and then some negotiation as we sort of figured out where we did stand. It's an amazing process to go through, but it really helps you identify those trends as you see them as well as how others see them. The strategic planning process that we've been involved with at the International Crane Foundation for the past 12 to 18 months has been very comprehensive. This is probably the first time at ICF that we've done something so comprehensive at the level of engaging staff and board, bringing in people from the outside, developing a framework, if you will, a global framework, we called it, for crane conservation in which we could place ourselves. We went to a great deal of trouble to create a frame in which we were only a small piece of the puzzle. I think the primary benefits, well, it's still a process going on for us, but right now the primary benefits for me has been to watch my staff grapple with finding the rhetoric that's actually tied meaningfully to the work that they think they're doing, that they think we as an organization should be doing, and that they think really deals with the challenges that face cranes.
Gathering this information and analyzing it all together sets the stage for the next step in the strategic planning process. Step 2, identifying critical strategic issues. Critical issues are fundamental policy or program concerns which define the most important choices your organization faces now and in the future. Critical issues can present themselves to us in several ways. Sometimes issues reflect major challenges. The departure of a major corporate donor from your community leads you to ask, how can we best expand and diversify our revenue base? Critical issues can also describe major impediments. If you find yourself stuck with yesterday's technology, the critical issue might be, how can we ensure that our staff has access to emerging technologies to maximize program impact and fundraising success? Critical issues can also capture important shifts in thinking. Technology has changed the very definition of a library from the place where we keep the books to a source of information in many forms. For libraries, the critical issue might be, how can we meet the customer's expectations for 24/7 access to books and information? And sometimes critical issues present themselves to us as tension points, which arise from the recognition of a difficult choice. For hunger action organizations, the critical issue might be, should we focus on providing emergency food or public policy work? Or we might express the issue as, how do we balance the need to provide emergency food today with the need for public policy advocacy to address the root causes of hunger? In some instances, an organization is already aware of the critical issues that the strategic planning process must help it address. However, in most situations, new critical issues are discovered by the planning team as they reflect together on the information from the external, market, and internal assessments. Another way to think about it, critical issues are not quick fixable problems like a leaky roof. Rather, they are challenges that affect us more deeply over a period of time. Now let's go on to the next step in the strategic planning process. Step 3, developing a mission, and then Step 4, developing a strategic vision. I've mentioned that you should think of strategic planning as a journey. You might ask, how do mission and vision become part of that journey? Let me try to illustrate it for you in the following way. You can see on the graphic two circles. In one, the current reality representing the present. And in the other corner, vision representing the future. The first two steps of the strategic planning process help us get a fix on the current reality, where we are today. Vision, which we'll be talking about a little more in a moment, helps us to begin to envision that hoped-for destination or future. And imagine that after we've crafted the vision statement, we're then able to draw an arrow between where we are and where we intend to be, so that when we talk about vision as conveying a sense of future direction and the strategic planning process as a journey, this graphic helps us to begin to think about it in that way. And then mission helps us answer the question, why are we on the journey in the first place? Now let's talk more about mission and vision. Let me define mission. Mission is a broad description of what we do, with or for whom we do it, our distinctive competence, and most importantly, why we do it. What is our ultimate end? Mission communicates purpose. Here are some examples. The first one, the mission of the YWCA of Lake County, Illinois. The second one, the Hunger Action Network's mission. And you can see that this one captures that tension point that we talked about earlier when we were discussing critical issues. And the third example, the mission statement of the Wisconsin Leadership Institute. Now, let me say more about strategic vision. The vision answers the question, if we were successful in creating the organization of our dreams and having the impact we most desire, what would this look like in, say, 5 years? A good vision has the following characteristics. It charts a clear future direction. It describes expected impact, how the world will have changed for the better as a result of our efforts. It describes the organization of our dreams. And it inspires us. A good vision statement passes what you might call the goosebumps test. Think of shared vision as the centerpiece of the strategic plan. Here are some examples. The first one, a thriving professional organization leading regional audiences to great music, is the vision of the Waukesha Symphony Orchestra. A second, this is the vision statement of the Milwaukee Public Library. And third, one of my favorites, the vision statement of Bowling Incorporated. It's an association of some of the major bowling organizations in America. More people bowling more often, having more fun. Even if you're not a bowler, you can see the vision. Let's take a moment now to summarize. If planning is a journey, the first two steps of the process, information gathering and identifying critical issues, tells us where we are right now. The third step, developing a mission statement, reminds us why we're on the journey in the first place. And step 4, developing a vision, helps us determine the destination. You may be asking, what's the difference really between mission and vision? I've been talking about them as two separate things. And sometimes the words are used interchangeably, so I'll try to clarify again. Mission answers the questions, why do we exist? What is our fundamental purpose? What is our reason for being? Vision is an answer to a different question. It's the hoped-for destination. It answers the question, if we could create the organization of our dreams and have the impact we most desire, what would this look like? And you really need both. You can have a clear sense of mission or purpose. That doesn't automatically answer the questions, where are we headed? What's the vision? To truly develop a shared vision within your organization, it is essential that you involve all stakeholders, including your board of directors, staff, customers, and partners. To better illustrate the concept of vision and what it can mean for an organization, I'd like to introduce you now to our third featured organization. Select Milwaukee promotes home ownership in city neighborhoods. In the following video case study, Ray Schmidt, Executive Director of Select Milwaukee, talks about the vision, explains how it was developed, how it's being used, and how it's beginning to transform their organization.
Select Milwaukee's mission is to help more people achieve the dream of home ownership in city neighborhoods because it enriches their lives and strengthens the community. Everything we do is driven by our mission. All our programs, our services, the partnerships that we've forged over the years is all about helping people navigate the purchase and finance process of a home in the city. Our core program is to provide assistance to prospective buyers navigating the purchase and finance process of a home, and that entails a lot of different things. It involves helping people determine if they're qualified to purchase a home now, if so, how much of a home they can qualify for. If not, often, which is often the case, we help our customers improve their standing relative to guidelines that banks establish for providing financing. So we provide credit counseling, budget counseling, home buyer education, helping people understand the responsibilities of home ownership, helping them understand what the cost of home ownership will be over the long haul. The vision of Select Milwaukee is a united, thriving Milwaukee, one homeowner at a time. And it's actually turned out to be a rather invigorating vision statement for us. Remarkably concise, but it's something that we're very proud of, very excited by, that very, very succinctly outlines where we hope we are, our customers are, and the city is in the years to come. Crafting a vision statement through our strategic planning process actually turned out to be a very invigorating experience, and our entire organization, staff, board, constituents, I think have just really been motivated by the notion of a united, thriving Milwaukee, one homeowner at a time. It really captures for us the essence of what our organization is about, and where we hope to be and what we hope to be about for the next several years. The vision statement has been very motivating for me personally as Executive Director at Select Milwaukee. I think it's helped me, I think it's helped our organization, staff, and board really focus on opportunities that we have to further our mission here. We have a variety of options to perhaps work with other organizations. There are always opportunities to chase the funds. There are partnerships that may appear at first blush to be appealing, but it's I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's really forced us to think a little more carefully and just be more thoughtful about what our next steps are as we pursue our mission. The visioning process that we used during our strategic planning process was one that involved most of our board members, all of our staff, and my recollection is that we were locked up in a room for several hours and everyone had the opportunity to just imagine what impact Select Milwaukee could have in our dream of dreams over the next 3 to 5 years. And also imagine what types of activities and programs and services that Select Milwaukee, again in our dream of dreams, might be involved in over the next 3 to 5 years. And it was a long, long list of really good ideas. And I think what the process did was help us break out of our day-to-day, grind-it-out mindset that so many of us find ourselves in. Don't take time to smell the flowers, and really dream about what we might be able to be about. And what's kind of remarkable to me is that process was very motivating, very invigorating, but the remarkable part of it is that we have this very short, concise vision statement that at one of our follow-up sessions we were struggling with different characterizations of our vision statement, each of which tried to, I think, say everything that we wanted to say, and actually it turned out one of our board members just blurted out, a united, thriving Milwaukee, one homeowner at a time, and every single person said, that's it, that's our vision.
Did you catch the excitement Ray had in telling us about Select Milwaukee's shared vision? We heard for vision to have value, it needs to be truly shared. To have shared vision means a lot of people need to be involved in its development. Shared vision energizes everyone and builds commitment, and it leads to unexpected discoveries and new opportunities. Before we go further, let's have a reality check. A lot of groups dream lofty visions, but they don't reach them. Why don't they? What's going on here? Well, I think I have just the thing. What I've got here in the studio is an oversized rubber band, and I want to warn you not to try to do this at home. I want you to imagine that the higher hand represents the vision. My lower hand represents the starting point, what I refer to as current reality. And to the degree that the new vision is a real stretch, it creates tension. I mean, literally, with the rubber band right now, with my hands pulling it apart, the vision creates a sense of tension. My higher hand is creating tension. Well, in organizations that are developing a vision statement in a strategic planning process, the same thing happens. That tension needs resolution. It's kind of hard to hold my hands out like this. My brain is telling me to do something to reduce the tension. And if I let go, the tension releases. What's important to note is that when an organization establishes shared vision for the future, the hoped-for destination that doesn't exist yet, a creative tension naturally develops. The organization seeks a resolution to this tension. As you saw with the rubber band, two things can happen. We either move current reality in the direction of the vision, or we talk ourselves out of the vision and pull the vision down toward current reality. Up to this point, I've described the beginning and the end of this journey called strategic planning. Now, let's talk about how you complete the journey. Take a look at the now familiar journey graphic with an important addition. we've added goals and strategies along the arrow that connects current reality and vision. You get to the vision through the accomplishment of goals. You accomplish your goals by means of the strategies you devise for each goal. Now, let's take a closer look at goals and strategies. We define goals as major accomplishments within a 3 to 5 year period. Here's an example. Expand and diversify the revenue base of the organization. We define strategies as methods for achieving goals and resolving the critical issues. And here are some examples. Increase corporate and individual giving, and generate more revenue from program fees. One more reality check. You've heard groups complain about developing a strategic plan, but then seeing that plan sit on the proverbial shelf. When and how does the strategic plan get turned into concrete action? This is the point where we begin talking about annual objectives. It's step number 7 in the strategic planning process. Annual objectives describe specific actions and projects that aim to implement the core strategies. And a good objective will answer a number of important questions. Who will do what, by when, and what's the measure of success? We'll talk about that a little more in a moment. Now, let's tie things together by looking at the progression from goal to strategy to objective. The goal is expand and diversify the revenue base. A strategy to help accomplish this goal, increase corporate and individual giving. And then an objective that reflects this strategy might read, the Fund Development Committee will raise $120,000 through the annual dinner. You can't successfully complete this transition from goals and strategies to objectives without considering the following critical questions. How do you intend to measure success in implementing your strategic plan? What are the hoped-for outcomes? And how will you measure progress in achieving these outcomes? In order to develop solid objectives, you need to be clear about how you will measure success. One approach is to generate a list of success indicators for each goal and its strategies before developing objectives. Let's look at an example. In the following example, you see the goal, build financial health to support mission-based programs, then a number of strategies, and then here's what I'm talking about. You develop a set of sample success indicators. You brainstorm a list, and you can see some of the examples. A good mix of funding sources. If we're successful, we'll be debt-free. We'll have increased fee-for-service revenue, etc. You then refine the list of success indicators down to those that will measure progress in the most meaningful way. Then begin to develop objectives, making sure they answer the following questions. Who will accomplish what, by when, and what is the measure of success? Being clear about how we intend to measure progress sets the stage for successful implementation of your strategic plan. This is so important that we asked Shelley Schnupp, Associate Director of Program Management and Development at the Helen Bader Institute for Nonprofit Management, to talk further on the subject.
Outcomes measurement is critical to the strategic planning process. And I'm really talking about outcomes measurement in terms of changes in people's lives. You know, when you think about good strategic planning, it gives you a sense of where it is you want to go, what needs to be different in the future about where you're going as an organization. And strategic planning really needs to answer that. And I think it answers it best in terms of identifying outcomes measures. And we can talk about outcomes measures in terms of different levels, but you have to have a sense of what's going to change in people's lives, in the community, if our strategic plan and how we carry it out is successful. So getting a real sense of what the desired outcomes will be as we implement our strategic plan is really critical. In the strategic planning process, I think it makes sense to begin talking about outcomes right away. You know, when you think about strategic planning, you're coming up with a vision for where the organization is going to go and what it is going to accomplish. And I think that vision needs to pay attention to what's going to be different in our community, what's going to be different in the lives of the people we work with and serve. It's very beneficial to organizations to have clear outcomes as they implement their strategic plan. Clearly identifying outcomes up front, sort of the big picture outcomes, the changes in community conditions and people's lives. But then as we begin developing our action plans, you know, there are levels of outcomes. Changes that occur in the short term, maybe in the medium term, and then in the long term. Strategic plans that don't incorporate strong outcomes thinking, I think the products tend, or the results tend to be frustrating to organizations. Well, we implemented our strategic plan, but we're not really seeing any evidence of change. I think there's a saying, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? Clearly, those outcomes set the direction for everything that we need to do. And if we don't have clear outcomes at the outset, we're likely to engage in activities and strategies that may not get us where we need to go.
Let's talk more about the connection between strategic planning and annual planning. Here's a sample strategic plan cycle chart that shows the interplay between a 3-year strategic plan, mission, vision, goals, and strategies, and the objectives that are developed on an annual basis. As Dilbert reminds us, nobody in their right mind would do strategic planning without the expectation that at some point the vision, mission, goals, and strategies are translated into concrete action plans on an annual basis. Here's how it fits together. At the top of this chart, we have the strategic plan that serves as the visionary blueprint for a 3-year period. The strategic plan functions as the foundation for annual, sometimes called operational planning. The objectives that we just spoke of are at the heart of these operational plans. Look down the column with the heading 2006 on the left, and you will begin to get a picture of what we're talking about. For a moment, imagine the end of 2005, the previous year. You would have developed objectives for the next year. You then would have built a budget to support those objectives. And you begin 2006 with those objectives and the supporting budget already in place. You begin implementation of the 2006 objectives. You monitor and adjust the objectives as needed. You evaluate your progress in accomplishing the objectives. And this is where you see the importance of having the evaluation or outcome measures built into the objective. Then, on an annual basis, you review the strategic plan, updating it as needed. Usually, changes are made at the level of strategy, if at all. Then you set objectives for the year 2007. Finally, you develop a budget to support those next year objectives. The process repeats itself year by year. There is one important difference in the column on the right for the year 2008. You'll notice that instead of only reviewing the current strategic plan, you are also developing the new strategic plan for the next 3 or 4 year cycle. This chart makes it look so neat and orderly, but you know better. Let's remember we're talking about a process that is both logical and intuitive, and we're talking about a world that is continuing to change. You need a strategic plan that makes it easy rather than difficult to adjust activities based on new developments, trends, and opportunities. Remember, you want a flexible strategic plan, not a strategic straitjacket. Another reality check now. Am I saying that if you follow this process, you'll automatically end up with an exciting and forward-thinking strategic plan? Not necessarily. The reality is, not all strategic plans are strategic. The risk is not thinking strategically and creatively. It's possible to go through the steps of the process and still end up with a strategic plan that isn't strategic at all. What's missing is innovation. Here are some suggestions to stimulate creativity and innovation. Include outsiders in the planning group. They bring a perspective that would be missing if we were just talking to ourselves. Use analogies or examples from other fields. Let me give you an example of that. Today, nonprofit organizations that work with children and families have begun to adopt the one-stop shop, almost like a shopping center approach, having all of the services in one place. That would be an example of a metaphor from other fields. Another suggestion, hold the planning sessions in remote settings, someplace else, not the place where the board and the staff typically meets. And finally, in general, let yourself go. Have some fun. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this program, so let me briefly review the levels of a strategic plan. As this graphic illustrates, we have a mission statement that reflects the purpose. We have a vision statement, usually 5 to 10 years out, that charts that future direction. Mission and vision are the foundation for goals, usually 3 to 5 years. We have strategies that answer the question, how will we achieve these goals? And then we turn the goals and strategies into objectives, usually on an annual basis. I'd also like to summarize a couple of the key points in the program. The first is the critical importance of board leadership and commitment. We involve lots and lots of people in the process, but the board's leadership role is really critical. Another thing that we talked about from the very beginning, the importance of agreeing on clear outcomes for the planning process so that we're all on the same page. And then finally, I can't say enough about the value of involving outsiders in the strategic planning process. What other suggestions can we offer you? Well, we asked some of the nonprofit leaders you met in this program to tell us what advice they would give other nonprofits considering strategic planning. Let's hear what they had to say.
A good strategic plan is as good as, the implementation process, and that implementation process has to be very complete. It has to have a good communication system, a good supporting and development system, and of course a good accountability system with specific deadlines and specific accountability systems.
I think we learned that it was important to set some kind of limits. We could have researched and planned forever. But at some point, we have to bring it to closure, have the plan, and then work the plan. And I would advise people not to delay working the plan.
First, have a good facilitator, a good consultant that understands the process, what's to be achieved, and could really get board involved in that process, and also have ways of getting the community involved in that process.
Identify what are the several decisions that organization is faced with in the near future, so that when thinking of a plan, already they know some of the decisions, whether it's to form a strategic alliance with another organization, whether it's to go into a new area of service, whether it's to diversify funding resources. They have several really pressing questions that the board has been looking at, so that when they get into the plan is still relevant to the ongoing work of the board.
This is the most important thing you will do, is to make sure that you know where you're going and why you want to get there and how exciting it can be.
The other thing that I think we can do with a strategic plan is educate funding sources about what our needs are. Sharing our strategic plan with foundations, with our politicians and our leaders to say, this is what New Concept can do, this is what we're focused on, and can you help me develop the funds and the resources to accomplish that?
My advice to nonprofits who are thinking about doing strategic planning would be to go for it and to not be afraid to deal with the tough issues, and also to get as many stakeholders involved as possible.
Be fairly certain that after the process there will be the requisite commitment to see things through.
Max Dupree ends his book Leadership Jazz with a captivating story about leaders whose actions were inspired by vision. The story describes a college in England hundreds of years ago. The leaders had gathered because they were concerned about the rotting oak beams in one of the major buildings on campus. And so they go out to a special section of the forest called Great Hall Woods that had been planted over 100 years earlier to grow the trees that would ultimately be available to harvest to turn into replacement oak beams for this particular building. This story demonstrates to us the vital link between strategic planning, vision, and the stewardship responsibilities of leadership. It's a lesson for all of us. Our strategic plans will touch the lives of individuals and communities far into the future. Now, if you are going to do strategic planning and have the same kinds of long-term impact in your organizations and communities, you've got some work to do. Best wishes on your strategic planning journey.